Strings are how we represent text in JavaScript. Strings consist of multiple characters that represent a word, sentence, or any other piece of information that could be represented with text. We're going to learn how to create strings in JavaScript as well as learn how to use them. Right now I have a very basic setup. I have an index.html file, and this HTML file just has a little bit of markup, but at the bottom we have a script including our strings.js. This strings.js file is where we will be working while we learn about strings in JavaScript. I'm going to pull up our strings.js file, and right now we don't have anything but a simple comment at the top of our file. We've learned a little bit about strings in the previous videos, but now we'll take a more in-depth look on how we can create strings and what types of characters we can include in our strings. The first thing I'm going to do is create a string and store it into a variable. I'm going to call this variable name, and we saw how to create variables in the previous videos. So we've seen how to create a simple string by using double quotes and then putting characters in between them. For instance, I'll put in my name, Jim, and we'll add a semicolon to the end of the line. This is how we can create a very simple string by just using the double quotes on the end and then whatever characters we want. If we want to test it out, we could do something with this string like run console.log, which we've seen in other videos. By running console.log and then passing in an argument, for instance, this string Jim, it will display the value of the argument to console.log in the bottom of our window in our browser. So I'm going to save out our strings.js, and we'll switch over to Chrome. This is our index.html page, and I'll refresh it, and if you look at the bottom of the screen, you can see that Jim is output into the console. Now, besides using double quotes, we could also use single quotes to define our strings. So for instance, I could do name2 and assign that to single quote Jim. And if we do another console.log with name2, we can save it out and refresh our page. And we can see that Jim was printed out twice. Right now, there is no difference between a double quote and a single quote when defining our strings. So what is the difference between a double quote and a single quote? Well, it really depends on how you're creating your strings. For the most part, they're equivalent. You can use a double quote wherever you could use a single quote, but there are some cases where you'll want to use one over the other. For instance, this is Jim's string. You'll notice that as I type the apostrophe, my text editor actually put me outside of the string. So if I tried to define it like this, it'd be very confusing because the apostrophe is the same single quote character we're using to delimit the string. So when JavaScript sees this statement, it sees a string opening with this is Jim, and what should be our literal apostrophe character is being interpreted as the end of our string. So everything from S space string is not part of our string. And then we have another open quote, which would just be the beginning of another string. So if we tried to run this code, we're going to get an uncaught syntax error, unexpected identifier. And that's because this code, sString, is not valid JavaScript code, but intended to be part of our string. Now, one solution we could do to avoid this is to, instead of using single quotes to define our string, we could change them to double quotes. Now, because I used a double quoted string to open up our string, the single quote used as the apostrophe inside of our sentence here will not be interpreted as the end of our string. Instead, the double quote will be the end of our string, and we get the result that we're looking for. So let's console.log our statement and try it out in our browser. So that's great. Now you could probably think of another situation where the inverse would be what you want to do. For instance, our statement 2, we might say something like he said, and then we want to use, for instance, the quotation marks to create a quotation in our sentence. And let's put a semicolon on our other statement as well. Now here, we wanted the double quotes around "this is awesome" to be a literal part of our string. But we suffer the same problem we did with our first statement. Because we used a double quotation mark to open our string, the double quote before the word "this" will delimit the end of a string. Then "this is awesome" will not be part of any string, but instead JavaScript code. Finally, the two quotations at the end will just be an empty string. We'll get a similar error if we save our code and refresh. We see we have an uncaught syntax error, unexpected identifier. So we could do the same thing we did with our first statement to fix this problem. Instead of using double quotes for our string delimiter, we'll switch it to single quotes. And this should work. So we'll save it out and refresh in our browser. And now we can see we have a string that has literal quotation marks inside of it. Now what if we wanted to have the string, "He said this is Jim's string." Let's call this var statement 3. If we wanted to delimit this with double quotation marks, for instance using this, we have the problem of our double quotation marks inside of our string prematurely ending our string. Or we could try to use a single quote, but again we have the problem of the apostrophe in Jim prematurely ending our string once again. So neither of these techniques will work to create the string that we want. There is, however, another way for us to embed special characters like double quotation marks and single quotation marks inside of our string literals. And that's by using a special character called the backslash. So for instance, we'll keep our single quotes on our string here, and what we'll do for the apostrophe inside the word Jim's is use our escape character, the backslash. It's very easy to do. All we do is right before the apostrophe that we want to put in our string, we add a leading backslash. The combination of backslash apostrophe is a special character which tells JavaScript that inside of the string, it should only be a single quote. However, in our source, we see there's a backslash and a single quote. But we can try this out in our browser. Let's do console.log statement 3 and try it out. And now we can see we have our complex string containing both double quotations and a single quotation mark without causing any errors in our JavaScript source. We can do the same thing for our double quotes right here, just to be safe. However, we don't need to do this because our string itself is surrounded by single quotes, but it's a good thing to do to escape our double quotes and our single quotes inside of our strings. So if we save it out, go back to our browser and refresh it, we see that our string still works with both of our double quotes and single quotes escaped. Now we've seen how to create strings in JavaScript. In the next video, we'll learn about other escape characters that we can use.